A's Cast Live continues from the town. Here's Chris Townsend.
Well, now joining us here on A's Cast Live, our buddy Martín Gallegos from MLB.com. How are you today?
What's up, Tony? I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. What have you been doing since the season ended?
Not a whole lot. It feels like it just happened yesterday, the whole last game of the season thing and everything. The playoffs have been going on, so I've been keeping up with that a little bit. And then today we had a kind of end-of-year talk with David Forst, Billy Beane, and Kotsay and them. So still kind of in in A's baseball mode. It doesn't really feel like the offseason yet. I'm sure after the playoffs it'll feel like that a little bit more.
We've played some of the sound from the press conference. Did you learn anything from it?
I don't know if I learned anything new. I think one few things are clear. I think if anybody had any doubts about Mark Kotsay, as being manager here, I think Billy and David both kind of, just both let it be known that they were pleased with the job that he did. Obviously, coming into a tough situation this year, they knew, the roster that they were giving him wasn't very favorable spot, but I think they both like the job that he did, and I think there's optimism about him going forward as the leader of this team for years that are going to be probably even younger with more younger guys coming up and prospects coming up. They feel like he's the right guy. So I think that was something that I kind of noted there was the kind of the doubling down on Kotsay and the job that he did this year through everything that they encountered that the A's went through.
Where are we with contracts with Beane and Forst, and because they're talking about their futures?
Well, it sounds like Billy has no plans of going anywhere. I know that's always kind of been every year for the last few years is he going to go somewhere else? Is there other things outside of baseball even that could possibly come up? But, he was asked about that, and it sounds like he has no plans of going anywhere. He's going to stick around. He may be still, involved in other, soccer ventures or something like that. But as far as his time with the A's, he basically said he doesn't see himself not being a part of the organization anytime soon. And David, I think, he's here as well. I don't think he sees himself going anywhere. I think, they both plan to be part of this rebuild and kind of want to see the end of it and see the end of the tunnel when the A's are back into contention again once they get back to, those winning ways.
When you start thinking about those winning ways, there is something to be said about, okay, you're going to have to go through a retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it. But to have to do it coming out of a lockout where you don't have a lot of time to make a lot of moves. Do you see a big difference in this team next year just because of that?
Yeah, and then they talked about that as well. I think definitely, the lockout impacting things. It certainly didn't help. A team that was, they were going to rebuild no matter what. They were going to make the trades no matter what. But the fact that, they weren't able to do it earlier, they basically had to go through a 6-day span of getting rid of everybody. And at the same time, trying to fill out a roster with, minor league signings and stuff like that. It was just hard, to really, make decisions that they could feel probably really comfortable about. Whereas now you get into more of a normal offseason, you kind of can lay out a little bit more of a blueprint, a plan for how you want to attack the offseason. I don't think they're going to go out and make any big moves. I don't think any of us expect that, but at least they can kind of set, a little bit more of, a list of players maybe that they think are attainable, whether it's through trade or free agency, maybe guys they could bring in on a minor league deal. They have more time to kind of assess the situation and, kind of make more decisions that they feel a little bit more comfortable about. So I think definitely having a full offseason, normal offseason for the first time in 2 years or so, I think that's going to be definitely a little bit more, it gives them a little bit more time to maybe field an even more competitive team. Whereas last year they were kind of, at times just kind of throwing darts and really weren't too comfortable about some of the guys that they were trying to bring in here.
In a season like we just had, can you really evaluate Mark Kotsay? Is that a fair question?
I think you can in the way that he handled the clubhouse and the way that he, handled certain decisions. I mean, I know obviously nowadays, managers aren't making the same type of decisions they were years ago. But certainly in the way that he handles, a staff and the way he handles players. And I think in those aspects, it seems like everybody was pleased with the job that he did. It seems like he did a good job of, keeping a good, culture in that clubhouse. They never at any point in the season, ever, got to a point where he really needed like a closed door meeting about guys, not giving it their all or anything like that. It seems like he had guys' spirits up all the time. And even with, what was it, 64 players or whatever that came up, they all bought in to what he was selling, even though it was a tough year. He didn't at once have to, blow up on the guys and go in there and have to, basically beg them to go out there and play hard. They did it all on their own. And I think that was set in spring training. So I think there are certain things that you could evaluate him on. The wins and losses, obviously not, I don't think, because I mean, he was dealt the hand that he was dealt in that aspect. But the other things, I think he gets, really good remarks for what he was able to do in those areas.
Yeah, I love Mark Kotsay. I always have. To be fair, which we have to be, it's tough to say, he got a bunch of young guys to play hard, and he said he was going to make that happen, right? And then the older players got shown the door, but guys played hard. But it's still tough to evaluate from a standpoint of whether we're talking about managing or all the coaches. It's kind of tough to evaluate what works and what doesn't when basically the only positive is we got people to play hard. Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's still, I mean, the whole evaluation will be, what happens, the next year or two, that part of it will I think is still ongoing. But I think early on, I think the returns are promising in terms of what they were expecting out of them and what they've gotten. And now, it will get to a point, obviously at some point, where the expectations rise a little bit and he'll be judged a little bit more on those moves, moves that he makes, in-game moves. Those will be a little bit more highlighted. But to this point, I think overall, the view of what they saw in year one out of him as a manager, as a rookie manager, I think the overall view is a positive one for them.
The Oakland A's have to do some stuff here this offseason if they're going to compete. I'm not saying winning record. I'm not saying wild card. I'm not saying division. They didn't compete this year. They were not competitive. So for them to be competitive, in your mind, what has to change on the roster?
I think they have a good, foundation in the bullpen. I think that's one thing that they've identified this year. Really came out of nowhere. I mean, I thought the bullpen was going to be probably one of their worst, aspects of their team, just based on how many people they lost last year. But the amount of guys that they found early on and throughout the year who are now going to be pieces going into next year, you feel like you have a good spot there in your options for the late innings. Not necessarily have one specific closer, but you have a lot of guys who have experience now pitching in the late innings. So I think the bullpen, if you can maintain a good bullpen and have those guys gain more experience, that's a positive. Starting pitching, I know it was up and down all year, but they've got some promising arms in there. Obviously, their offense and defense. The defense was a problem all year. It seems like they've got a couple of really good fielders, like Nick Allen and out in center with Pache and stuff like that. But I think defensively, playing clean, sound baseball, that's something that Kotsay always kind of talked about throughout the years. They didn't do that enough, and then that, especially for a team that's not high as talent wise as other teams, you got to play clean baseball. So I think defensively is something where they need to improve. And then hitting, I mean, we all saw the numbers at the end of the year. The hitting overall throughout the year was not good. They had one of the worst offenses in baseball. So they got to find a source of production. And I think in terms of getting more competitive towards next year, you hope that some of these guys who got called up this year, like Shea Langoliers, Nick Allen, Jordan Diaz, some of these guys take that next step next year, have their full year under their belt. And along with other guys like Tyler Soderstrom and Zach Geloff who finished the year at AAA, you hope that those guys can come up at some point, whether it's the second half, and kind of start building something here. A core group of guys like we saw a few years back with Chapman, Olsen, Pinder, all these guys who came up. See these guys who have won together in the minors kind of start to mesh at the big league level, and if you can kind of develop that core next year, I think that's what it's all about for next year. Taking a step forward, being more competitive, winning more games than this year, but more importantly, I think finding that core group of players, core group of young guys, out of those prospects that you have down there, and hope that some of them evolve into, players who you can count on for the next few years to lead that next, playoff group here in Oakland.
Yeah, if someone said, listen, you're going to get a bunch of starts from Cole Irvin, Paul Blackburn, James Caprillion, Waldachuk, Sears, bullpen is reliable, and these young players come up and they hit a bit and give you some offense, there's a recipe there, right? There is a recipe there for how they could be competitive. I think there's no question. It's going to start with the starting pitching. If you can get a bunch of starts from these guys and they compete, and because some of these offensive guys will hit, some of them will come up and produce. Jordan Diaz. There is a way to say I can give you something competitive to watch next year.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like definitely in the second or the last month of the season, the final few weeks, they had that stretch where they faced, like all-star pitchers that whole homestand, the Mariners and Mets. And this offense, they rose up to the challenge. They didn't win every game, but it seems like against every starter that week, they were going up there and being competitive, putting together competitive at-bats. And I think definitely the experience, even if the numbers don't show it, a lot of these guys, the experience that they've gotten this year, it's going to help a lot next year. Once they come into spring training and into the regular season, a little bit more confidence knowing that they've faced a lot of these, big league pitchers. They always talk about it all the time. It's different up here. These pitchers know what they're doing. There's no easy night, for a hitter up here. It's always going to be difficult. So they've kind of learned that firsthand, and now going forward to next year, they're going to be a lot better for it. So I definitely could see a scenario where the offense is better just because of all these young guys are going to be around for the whole season. But yeah, I mean, pitching is always the most important thing for any team, and it seems like there's a promising view of this pitching staff, with the starters and the relievers, just based on what they provided this year, especially towards the second half.
Yeah, that's what I say the big story was from Wednesday, and I know it's going to be Stephen Vogt hitting a home run his last at-bat, and that was great, and his kids, that was all special. But Waldachuk going 7 shutout innings and shoving against Shohei Ohtani just kind of it shows you what the future could be. And I think about Soderstrom, Tyler Soderstrom, he's a prodigy. And he's the type of guy that I hope, and we know every single team, we don't, their free agency clock, we don't deal with that wink, wink. But if they don't mess around with that, when he is ready, because he's hit at every level. We saw that now with Jordan Diaz. Soderstrom could be a guy that comes up and really could change things for the A's. Do you see that happening next year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the way they've moved him up aggressively, I mean, they're clearly not afraid to expose him to a new level if they feel comfortable with his hitting ability. And really, I mean, if he came up now, if it would have came up, in September, I feel like he would have held his own against Major League pitching. He's that special with the bat. It's all just about finding, is he going to be a catcher full time? Is he going to play first base? I feel like now with so many catchers in the organization, especially now that they drafted Susac as well, and they've got guys like Kyle McCann, obviously Murphy and Langeliers at the big league level. You don't need him to catch all the time. I think maybe they keep that option, that skill open, but maybe you move him to first base and you could really get the most out of his bat. I feel like keeping him off his knees for so long. But I mean, every spring training the last couple of years, we've seen him with, he mingles around with the big league hitters and he goes into their batting practice groups, and it's just incredible to watch. I mean, it's definitely a different sound off his bat. I think he's going to be a really special player offensively. He could, be one of the best hitters in baseball. I think, over time, he's so young and he's so advanced for his age that, I think if you're looking for excitement, I think whenever he comes up, I think that's going to be really exciting. And I think, like I said, I think it could be next year because he finished the year at AAA. You got to think if he starts next year at AAA, has a good first half, maybe we see kind of like the Shea Langeliers route where you see him come up in August and kind of integrating with this team. And then maybe guys like Geloff follow and stuff like that. But Soderstrom obviously at the top of that list, being their top prospect in the organization, one of the top prospects in baseball by multiple outlets.
What needs to happen with Christian Pache this offseason to make him relevant next year?
I think you just got to get it figured out with the bat, and I know it's obviously still a huge concern. The numbers were not great, and it seems like he took that stint down to AAA, and he was trying to work on some things. He came back up and didn't really get a whole lot of playing time. So it's hard to judge, if there were any adjustments that he made once he came back. But entering a full, spring training, with the A's, I think the offensive side is obviously a major work in progress. I mean, the A's don't need him to hit 300. I mean, his defense is so great. I mean, he could win multiple gold gloves over his career. Just they need him to hit a little bit more. I mean, you can't be hitting 150, 130, at the major league level, with that many at bats. It's just you can't put that out there every day. But if he could, just work on, he's got some foundation there where he hits the ball hard, but it just seems like he hits it on the ground so often. I mean, if he could find an approach, kind of like a Nick Allen approach, the way he was able to kind of carve out, his own ability to just go the other way consistently, and just stick to that approach and not try to hit homers. Even if you're hitting just 240, 250 at the most, with that defense, that's more than enough. You're going to be, a positive WAR player by a lot, by all the runs you're saving on defense. So they just need, decent stuff at the plate, because his glove is just so special. And I think that's going to be obviously a big storyline going to next year is, can Pache, hit enough to man down that spot every day. I think the A's are still, from everyone I've talked to with the front office and the coaches, they're still high on him. They still feel like he's their center fielder of the future, but he's got to get that offense part of his game going a little bit more.
All right, so we're all going to be down in San Diego for the winter meetings. A's Cast is going to take you out to dinner for all the things that you've done for us. Cody will pick up the tab, but we will take you, Mark. It's the offer's there. We're taking you to dinner in San Diego.
I would love to.
Okay.
Hang out with you guys.
So we'll take you to dinner, and then we're going to leave San Diego. When we leave San Diego, is Sean Murphy still in Oakland A?
I think so. I think they're going to start out the year with the Murphy Langeliers combo, and it's going to be one of the better combos in baseball. Does he last the whole year? I think that's another question. Maybe you get to the trade deadline, and the A's are again going through a year where they're not in contention, and Sean Murphy has a great first half. Then you could get a whole lot for him. But I think they'll stand pat. That's my feeling based on what I'm thinking. I think he sticks the year to begin the year in Oakland. That's what I'm thinking.
By the way, your newsletter is awesome. Do we call it a newsletter, or am I being too old school?
Yeah, no, it's still a newsletter. Yeah.
Okay, the newsletters, I like it. Folks, I get it to my email. I'm assuming I signed up at MLB.com, right, to get it?
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's awesome because you have a main article, and then you have all this other stuff, information. Hell, there's trivia in there too. Tell people about your newsletter, because it's a great way to keep updated on everything going on with the team.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it from fans, and it's been great. Get emails from fans every week about how much they appreciate it, and it's just kind of trying to bring a different angle. Kind of a more fun spin on things. I mean, I still, like you said, there's a main article every week that's a little bit more, what's going on the field or what's going on with the player. But I do also kind of like to go behind the scenes. I do a lot of, walk-up song stuff or just players off the field interest stuff. And it'll still be going on throughout the off season. I'll have one every week coming out. So those who already subscribe at MLB.com or athletics.com or whenever I tweet out the link, if you just click on it and go to the bottom, you can just subscribe to it. And, it's a fun thing I like to do, to bring a little bit extra to the fans. And like I said, the reviews have been positive. So, we'll keep doing it, as long as we can.
All right. That's my way to softball into this question. All right, Cody, I want you a part of this too. Ramón Laureano, this was a really bad year. You test positive for PEDs. You're suspended for the first part of the season. This is your opportunity to prove to people that, because he had anabolic steroids in his system. So, it is what it is. And this was your time to come out and prove that your game isn't about steroids. Health not good, never got consistent. He had a really bad year in a year that meant a lot. So I want to ask both of you, we'll start with you, Martín. Are you buying stock in the future that is Ramón Laureano?
Well, based on the year that he had, I'd be very hesitant, obviously. I think even before the suspension, injuries were always kind of a concern. Even when he was, having his best years, it seems like it was tough for him to stay healthy. And this year, it just kind of with the suspension and coming back and dealing with different injuries throughout the year, he never got it going. There was never a point in the season where he looked like, the Ramón Laureano of old. So, he's in a situation where going into next year, he has to prove himself to the A's. He has to prove himself to the public that, he's a better player than what he was. And obviously with the suspension thing, looming over him, I think that's something that mentally definitely affected him. He talked to us about it kind of the final series of the year, about how it was tough for him to deal with that when he first came back. And I think he let it get to him at the plate, on the field as well. I think he told us that he wants to be a center fielder, and when having to move to right for Kotsay, that wasn't something that he really enjoyed either. He understood it, but he prides himself on being a great center fielder as well. So the stock is very low right now. So going next year, if you're looking at players who have something to prove, he's got a ton to prove, because he had such a bad year. And I do, he did mention things that he wants to work on, getting, his body ready for a 162 game year. He feels like he hasn't been doing the right strength training to prepare himself for a full 162 game season. And he's frustrated by that. He wants to play, as close to 162 games as possible. But, he's got a lot that he's going to have to prove to a lot of people next year for sure.
Cody?
With Martín, stock's low, but I feel like
Are you buying?
No.
Sometimes it's good to buy low because it could be high, baby.
I'm going to say no for now, because I feel like if he could become the A's Kevin Kiermaier.
Kevin Kiermaier?
Well, I'm saying he's
glove, no hit.
That's what he was last year, but he hits more home runs, so he has more power. So if he can become a better above average power hitter at center field or right field, wherever he ends up playing, I think his value goes back up. And better question is he even on the team next year? Because how many teams wanted him last offseason? This year, Boston needs an outfielder. There's so many teams that can use an outfielder. The Brewers can use an outfielder. So is he here? Who knows? But if he's here, he needs to rebuild his stock for me.
All right, give me your 4 winners in this next round.
Definitely Astros. I think they're my pick to win it all, honestly. Man, the Padres had a good showing against the Mets, but I'm still going to go Dodgers. I think they just have that. I don't know. They have that dominance over them that's just kind of hard to shake.
There's no question about that.
yeah, it's kind of hard to look past that one. I go Braves, and you know what? Man, it's a tough one.
Do it. I know you want to do it.
Man, Cleveland's fun. They're a fun team.
Yeah, attaboy.
You know what? I'll go Cleveland. Cleveland's going to upset. They're going to upset New York.
Beautiful. Great stuff. We'll have you on again soon, and keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing a bang-up job.
All right, Tony. Thanks. Anytime, man.
Thanks, buddy. Martín Gallegos.